Thank you to all the supervisors for the opportunity to speak to you this afternoon. I come before you not to lecture you, not to berate you, but to implore you to initiate real and lasting changes in the operation of the San Francisco Police Department. Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. It is critical that all of us, San Francisco leadership and the community, know the history of police misconduct in the city and how it has been addressed in order for us to move forward. For 79 years, from 1937 to the present, the San Francisco Police Department has been involved in several major instances of misconduct and racial discrimination, all of which have been well documented. In 1937, the mayor and DA, working together, uncovered police corruption, including payoffs and staged raids. Officers were fired, the entire police commission was forced to resign, and a scathing 2 million-word report was issued. That report was stolen from the city clerk's office and has not been seen since 1937. In 1943, the San Francisco Chronicle ran an expose on police corruption. No officers were disciplined. In 1955, the paper ran a 12-part series on police corruption. No officers were disciplined. In 1965, San Francisco officers arrested a group of civil rights lawyers who refused to allow the police to enter a fundraiser for the gay community. At trial, all charges against those lawyers were dismissed. No officers were disciplined. In 1966, San Francisco officers targeted the transgender community by arresting and mistreating customers at the Camp Town cafeteria. Rioting followed. No officers were disciplined. In 1973, public advocates filed a lawsuit against the city for racial bias in the police department's entrance exams and in the department's promotion policies. That lawsuit resulted in a federal consent decree that was not lifted until 1998, a period of 25 years that included continuing litigation. In 1998, the city of San Francisco pledged that 45% of all new recruits in the police department would be people of color. In 1979, after the manslaughter conviction of Dan White and the ensuing riots, several lawsuits were filed by protesters against the police department for excessive force. No officers were disciplined. In 1984, 4 officers were fired for paying a prostitute to perform sex acts on an unwilling cadet. In 1988, LaDoris Cordell was beaten by police at a peaceful protest that was caught on video and televised widely. The city paid for a substantial settlement, and no officers were disciplined. In 1989, an ACT UP protest was interrupted by police beatings and arrests. A class action lawsuit followed, along with suspensions and resignations by officers. The Office of Citizens Complaints found that the Deputy Chief Jordan had ordered the sweep and recommended that he be demoted. In 1992, during the Rodney King demonstrations, San Francisco officers made widespread arrests. As well, 2,000 copies of the San Francisco Bay Times that ran an unflattering story about the department were stolen and found at a police station. That led to the firing of Chief Hungisto, and an officer who was involved in the theft of the papers became the POA president. In 1995, San Francisco officers raided a New Year's Eve AIDS benefit. The police commission found 4 officers used excessive force. None were fired. Also, at that time, Aaron Williams, a black man, died in police custody. An officer was deemed to have been involved in the death, for which he was not fired, but suspended for 90 days. In 2002 and 2003, In 2002, 3 off-duty officers, one of whom was the son of the then assistant chief, assaulted 2 civilians who refused to give them their fajitas. Dubbed Fajita-gate, the grand jury indicted the entire leadership of the police department for covering up that incident. However, all of the charges were dropped. A civil jury awarded damages to the victims of the beating. In 2005, there was Videogate. An officer at the Bayview station posted a video that parodied racist, sexist, and homophobic subjects. The result was that over a dozen officers were disciplined. The officer who made the video resigned. He was not fired. And 2 other officers were suspended, each for 360 days. 2006 to 2007, the San Francisco Chronicle ran a 3-month-long series on the department's use of force. Then Chief Fong dismissed the report, and no changes were implemented. In 2009, the attorney for the police department's Internal Affairs Division brought a case against the then deputy chief for failure to follow the department's policies on how to deal with allegations of domestic violence. As a result, the police commission demoted him to captain. The city subsequently promoted that captain to chief, after which the city's lawyer who had brought the case against that officer was fired. She sued for wrongful termination and received a settlement that cost the city $750,000. Finally, in 2011, 3 officers were indicted by the federal government for illegal searches, thefts, and robbery. All were convicted, and the Fed's release of information from those cases led to Textgate and to the report by the Blue Ribbon Panel. So that's the history. 79 years of lawsuits, settlements, officer discipline, promotions, exposés by newspapers, city-issued reports, a grand jury indictment, resignation of an entire police commission, and a 25-year-long consent decree. And sadly, little has changed. What we know from this history is that these instances of misconduct are not isolated incidents or aberrations. Rather, they are part of a 79-year pattern of systemic misconduct and cultural entrenchment within the department. That history reveals the many obstacles to reform, among them failure of city leadership, politicization of the police commission, failure of police leadership, failure of effective civilian oversight, and resistance from the police union. I believe that resistance from the police union poses the greatest obstacle to reform. Now, I am a staunch supporter of unions, and I have never crossed a picket line, and I never will. That being said, police unions are unique. Police officers are not like other workers. They have state-sanctioned power of life and death over all of us. While most unions in the United States have grown weaker since the 70s, police unions have grown stronger. We all know that they can make life very difficult for elected officials by attacking them as soft on crime, and they have deep pockets to fund political candidates who will do their bidding. Sadly, police unions throughout the country over the last 50 years have opposed police reforms, ranging from having to wear name tags on their uniforms, to the use of body-worn cameras, to documenting uses of force. This year, Newark, New Jersey created a civilian review board that was acclaimed as a model of oversight. The city's police union immediately announced that it would sue to shut it down. Here in San Francisco, the new use of force policy, unanimously approved by the Police Commission in June, to my knowledge, has not yet been implemented because it's being held up in the POA's meet and confer process. Professor Samuel Walker, an emeritus professor of criminal justice at the University of Nebraska at Omaha and an expert on police accountability, says that police unions have created a culture of impunity. It is this culture of impunity that permeates the San Francisco Police Department, as has been well documented in our report. The San Francisco Police Department has a Not on My Watch pledge that says, I pledge to serve the people of San Francisco faithfully and honestly without prejudice. I will not tolerate hate or bigotry in our community or from my fellow officers. I will confront intolerance and report any such conduct without question or pause. I will maintain the integrity of the San Francisco Police Department and safeguard the trust of the people of San Francisco. I will treat members of the community as I would hope to be treated myself. I will pursue justice with compassion, and I respect the dignity of others. For those who would suggest there is any place for the stain of intolerance, I pledge not on my watch.
Oh, yeah.
The department's former POA president and current paid consultant to the department on his Facebook page derided that pledge. He called officers who reported misconduct of other officers trained snitches. Commenters on his page, undoubtedly police officers, wanted the names of the snitches so they could be taken care of. Characterized sensitivity training as bullshit, and about officers who are whistleblowers said, I hope it doesn't get ugly out there. Someone could get hurt. This is talk one would expect from gang members and from thugs, not from the leadership of a police union. I believe that the great majority of police officers in San Francisco that belong to the POA are not like those who made those comments. So it is my hope that the good people in the department, the officers who see reform as a positive for the department, will find their voices and will join together to bring new leadership to the POA. It is also my hope that you, the city leadership, will find your voices and display the political will to stand up to intimidation, that you will say no to those who oppose the meaningful and doable reforms we have recommended and that the community supports. I implore you to put aside your political differences and stand united in moving forward to implement these recommendations. Do it because the lives of the people of San Francisco are at stake. Let us not be condemned to repeat the past. The time is ripe to do right. Thank you.